Hey, welcome back to Practical Liberty. My name is Henry Bingaman. Well, this is the first episode back since I took a week off for Thanksgiving. And it's the second time I'm recording this particular podcast. My intention was to release this on Friday, as always. But after recording the whole thing, I discovered that there was some kind of malfunction with my microphone. The entire recording was just a bunch of burring robot noises. So that was extremely frustrating. I'm actually not even sure how I fixed it, to be honest. I just cleared a bunch of space in my computer and updated all of my software, including my operating system, which took forever. And as you can hear, I hope it appears to be working again. I'm glad at least it happened on a solo episode instead of an interview. I'm very appreciative of my guests, and I'd be really embarrassed if I wasted somebody's time because of some technical issue. Speaking of interviews, next week I'll be talking to my friend and someone I've worked with for a long time and made a lot of money with, Marcel Allison. We're going to talk about how to maintain your sanity and not lose your business when everything seems to be going wrong in your personal life. So that's going to be a fairly intense conversation, I think. And I'm hoping a lot of people will relate to it and hopefully get a lot out of it. Then after that, I'm going to be having on one of my favorite history podcasters. We're going to talk about some of the parts of history that most people seem to forget about, but they can explain a lot about the current state of the world. But for the second recording of this particular podcast, I want to talk about everybody's favorite topic, money. As you may know, I talk a lot about the four cornerstones of liberty. Those are security, wealth, awareness, and network. But that second cornerstone, wealth, the name is a little bit misleading. Wealth invokes this idea of being rich. It would probably be more accurate if I said security, money, awareness, and network. It's just that SWAN is a much better acronym than S-MAN. I guess I could call it MANS, but then that feels misogynistic. I don't know. If you can think of a better way of arranging those letters, let me know. So first, what is money? It seems like a dumb question, but it's actually a very important one. So the technical definition of money is something generally accepted as a medium of exchange, a measure of value, or a means of payment. There's probably some technical difference between means of payment and medium of exchange. If I had to guess, I would think the means of payment distinction would have to do with debt, but I'm not an economist. I just play one on the internet. Anyway, there's probably no other invention that has done more to advance human civilization than money. Maybe writing, but the oldest known writing was used to keep track of debts, so there's a case to be made that writing and money were developed for the same reasons. Now, there are necessities in life: food, water, air, shelter. Those are very concrete things. But as far as other things, I can't think of anything else that's so universally useful as money. And it's not at all a concrete thing. It's represented by concrete things like paper and coins, or, hopefully one day a stable blockchain-based digital currency. But the actual concept of money is an abstraction. It's an abstraction for value. I think that's why there are a lot of nonsense thoughts and myths that have popped up around the concept of money. For today's podcast, I want to take a crack at dispelling at least a few of those. And myth number one, the myth about money that I hear the most, is that money can't buy you happiness. So if you were to take that at face value, what you're saying is that the poorest people are the happiest people? Like $0 is the ideal amount of money for happiness? Now, I know that's not what anyone means when they say that. The most common response when I see someone pushed on this is to say, studies have proven that happiness tops out at $75,000 a year. Making more than that doesn't make you any happier. First of all, if you know anything about the replication crisis in social sciences, you should immediately question anyone who says studies have proven. Nothing is proven as a cold hard fact in the soft sciences. You can prove things in mathematics. You can get really, really close to proving things as absolute truths anyway in physics, although quantum mechanics muddies the waters there. And you can make some discoveries in biology or chemistry that, they may not be 100% understood, but they're very useful. Yeah, I'm thinking of things like medicines. You could have some medicines that make 8 people better, has no effect on one person, and makes one person worse. But a social science claiming to have discovered a truth, that's just a joke. So I went and looked up the study that everyone points to for that $75,000 claim. It's actually a paper by Daniel Kahneman. Now, Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winning psychologist who's done some really good work. I actually really recommend his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, for discovering how people make decisions. Anyway, let's look at what the paper says. Let me pull this up. The headline is "High Income Improves Evaluation of Life, but Not Emotional Well-Being." So you can already tell this paper is not saying you don't get happier after $75,000. It's pretty long and we don't need to cover every nuance, so I'm going to skip down to the conclusion. Here is the key for me. Beyond approximately $75,000 in the contemporary United States, however, higher income is neither the road to experienced happiness nor the road to relief of unhappiness or stress. although higher income continues to improve individuals' life evaluations. Below $75,000, many factors become gradually worse, at least on average. Now, Kahneman defines emotional well-being as the frequency which you experience fascination, joy, anxiety, sadness, and anger. So I read that as $75,000 is the minimum threshold for a generally happy life. Since life evaluations get better the more you make, it's almost the exact opposite conclusion that money doesn't buy you happiness. And given inflation since 2010, you need to make about $110,000 today to even begin maximizing your happiness, according to the study. That's household income. So 2 parents and 1.8 kids, or whatever the average family is. Now, I actually don't even believe that. You can be happy with way less and miserable with way more. But if you're going to cite this study, that's the logical conclusion you'd have to make. The truth is, money can buy you happiness, but too many people use it to buy things that make them miserable. And I'm not immune to this. I bought things that stressed me out and made me less happy. But the major problem is the whole keeping up with the Joneses phenomenon. The idea that your stuff is a direct proxy for your social status. So if one of your neighbors gets a fancy new car, it makes you feel bad about your own car. So you go out and spend more money than you should to get an even better car. Then you feel great for about 5 days until another neighbor down the street goes out and buys something even fancier. We can all recognize that, logically, this is stupid, but you have to be able to see it to stop yourself from doing it. Yeah. A few years ago, when I was flying around a lot more than I am these days, I was speaking at a conference, and I was out at the dinner talking to another one of the speakers, and he mentioned that he flew in on a private jet. Now, this dude is a big deal, but he's not that big of a deal. So I asked, how can you afford to do that? And he told me about these private jet memberships. So there are a bunch of different membership programs, but they all work basically the same way, where you don't own the jet, but you buy a card that has a certain amount of miles or hours. I don't remember all the details, but I think he was spending something like $80,000 a year to fly private. So as soon as I got home from that event, I started looking into getting one of those, membership cards. Now, I think I spent around 15 grand on first class flights that year, and I was traveling a lot, but I seriously considered sending $65,000 more than that just to keep up with the Joneses. And I learned as a bonus, I'm incredibly skilled at coming up with excuses to do dumb things with no benefit just because I want to. I did eventually come out on the side of common sense, but I was tempted. And look, if you're making $10 million a year, then 80K really might be worth it. You wouldn't even feel it. In that case, good for you. Go ahead and splurge. But when you spend money that actually hurts on things you don't need, that's when you're just buying misery. And look, this keeping up with the Joneses isn't even close to a new phenomenon. In fact, the phrase itself comes from a newspaper comic strip called Keeping Up with the Joneses, and that was first printed in 1913. But you can go back further than that by a lot. One of the 10 commandments is not to covet. It's the 8th or 9th, 10th, whatever. It's on the second tablet, but it made the list. And it wasn't just thou shalt not covet. It was thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife or house or animals or servants. In other words, thou shalt not try to keep up with the Joneses. My point, if I have one, is that buying the wrong things for the wrong reasons is one way money can make you miserable. But if you have a purpose in life, then money can buy you happiness. It can buy you comfort, safety, and stability for you and your family. It can buy you more of almost anything you value. So if you have a philosophical or spiritual grounding where the things you value the most do actually bring you more happiness in your life, then the more money you have, the happier you can be. Now, I think the reason people believe this first myth, that money can't buy happiness, is partially because they also believe the second myth. And that is, you have to work harder to make more money. This one is also extremely common mistake, or misconception, I could say. And to most people, it seems logical. In other contexts throughout history, it would have been logical. The more seeds you plant, the more crops you harvest, the more animals you hunt, the more meat you'll have. That just makes sense. Another reason people believe this is because absolutely no modern education system teaches kids how the economy actually works. Most kids are taught that, you go to school, then you get a job at the highest dollar per hour rate you can. Then you work that job, maybe get an occasional raise until you retire on Social Security. Now, if you're a smart kid, maybe you're taught that you go to college so you can get a better job that pays a better salary and, comes with a retirement plan. Well, all right, in that hourly rate, it's true that if you work 40 hours a week at $25 an hour, you'll make $1,000 a week. But if you work 60 hours a week, you'll get $1,500. And in the salary case, if you work really hard at an $80,000 a year job, maybe you'll get promoted to a $100,000 a year position in that company. But here's what very few of those employees understand. It has nothing to do with the harder you work, the more you get paid. It's entirely the more value you provide, the more value you receive. This is one reason why it's so important to understand that money is a store of value. The money is the abstraction for the value. So the problem with the public school system, besides the corruption, child abuse, socialism, the problem is that it teaches kids that their time is the value that they have to offer. You have to be in this building for 7 or 8 hours a day. It doesn't matter if you already know this material. It doesn't matter if there are other things you'd rather be doing. You put your butt in the seat and you do this work because that's what we told you to do. It's the factory model, right? In a factory model, it's actually counterproductive for one worker to add more value than another worker. So as a quick aside on this, I actually worked in a factory one summer during college. It was a company that made styrofoam containers. My job was to load the orders into the truck. So a big tractor trailer backs into the cargo bay. Forklift driver would go bring all the pallets with the different types of containers, and they drop it behind that truck. And then my job was to load them into the truck. After getting yelled at a couple dozen times in the first week or two, I learned not to work too quickly. If you're on your second truck when everyone else is only halfway through their first, you've made them look bad. Even the warehouse manager didn't want me to work too fast. Just think of it from his view. If I'm loading 2 extra trailers a week than everybody else, and then I leave at the end of the summer, it looks like his performance dropped by 2 trailers a week, and he has to find a way to explain that. Anyway, it wasn't fun work, but I actually really liked the people I was working with. The work seemed kind of pointless, but everyone got along pretty well. It was a pretty even mix of white, black, and Hispanic people, and they all constantly made the most offensive racial and stereotypical jokes about each other, and I can't repeat any of them, but everybody got along. There were a couple of us summer and temp workers, but the main crew, they didn't complain about their jobs. They just wanted to show up, do the minimal possible amount of work, and then go home, or maybe pick up a second shift if they needed the money and they could find somebody to work for them. That's the more time, the harder you work, the more you get paid. My point here is that this is how most people think about work. And then you hear the socialist type say that this just proves it's not fair that some people make millions of dollars and some people only make 30K. And by that view of the world, I can totally understand why they say billionaires shouldn't exist. They are absolutely right that no one person can work so much harder than another person that, one deserves $1 billion and the other deserves 30,000. If hard work is the measure of how much money you could or should make, that's impossible. But it is possible. In fact, it's more than possible. It's obviously true that one person can provide $1 billion worth of value while another person only provides $30,000 worth of value. Look, if you invent the smartphone that almost every single person has in their pocket, and another person moves bags from point A to point B all day, one of those people has objectively done something more valuable than the other person. Now, it's also true that one person can grift $1 billion off the government, and the higher the stakes, the more likely there is to be corruption involved. But, that's an argument for abolishing the government instead of abolishing billionaires. But I don't want you to think I don't believe in the idea of hard work. I do. And there have been times in my life where I've worked incredibly, incredibly hard. But the best place to do hard work is when it's increasing your own ability to provide value. When I first decided to become a copywriter, I worked like 12-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week. I don't know how many words of copy I wrote, but it was probably like close to 2,000 words a day. And to be honest, I only made marginal improvements in the early days. I got pretty good at writing like 200 to 500 word articles for a couple $100 each because that was the majority of the work I was getting at first. And I learned some basic graphic design and programming skills because I needed to add those in just to get the work. But the fact that I was willing to work so hard got a few people's attentions, and that got me a series of mentors who helped me turn my, scattershot practice of writing into highly focused and tailored practice, which helped me develop my copy skills extremely quickly. So hard work does help you make more money, but not in the linear sense that most people think. Does that make sense? I hope so. Okay, now for the last money myth that I think holds a lot of people back. And that myth is the amount of money you have says something about your worth as a person. This is a particularly dangerous belief, and it's one that a lot of people have without exactly realizing that they hold that belief. And it actually works 2 ways. On one side of the coin, there's the belief that people who have a lot of money must be worth more as a person. That there's some moral or intrinsic value of that person, and that's the reason that they're rich. The other side of that coin are the people who believe the exact opposite, that it's some moral failing in a person that allows them to, screw over and steal from so many people that they were able to amass, this pile of wealth that they refuse to share with the more deserving masses. Channeling my inner Marx. Both of these are stupid. I've met rich people who are humble and generous, caring, kind, all the virtues that most of us recognize as good. And I've met rich people who would watch a baby drown to avoid getting their shoes wet. And by the way, there are poor and middle-class people who are good and some who are psychos too. Money says nothing about the worth of a person. But if you want to get more money, believing rich people are better or worse is going to seriously hold you back. So first, if you believe rich people are better than you, then you're going to have a hard time making more money. People act consistently with their inner beliefs. So if you're a poor dude that believes he's worth less than a rich dude, then it's internally inconsistent for you to go out and make a lot of money. You won't want to invest that time in learning how to provide more value because you won't think you have that value to provide. Same thing is true for the people who believe money makes you a worse person. If a dude thinks he's better because he's not one of those evil rich people, then he has absolutely no reason to go out and try to figure out how to actually make more money. Nobody would try to intentionally make themselves a worse person, right? Now, there are a handful of people out there with, extraordinary talents that make them rich. LeBron James strikes me as someone who's not particularly competent in business or economics, but he's an amazing athlete that, millions of people want to pay to watch. I don't think he understands that he's providing value through entertainment instead of his social commentary. But the vast majority of people who make a lot of money, especially through entrepreneurship, they aren't particularly smart or naturally talented at too many things. What they did, whether they understood it or not, was figure out that they had value to provide, and the more value provided, the more money they made. Look, let me use a chess analogy here. Most people in the world don't even know the rules of chess. They don't even know how the pieces move. Then a few people are chess prodigies, who go on to become grandmasters. Then there are people like me. I know all the rules of the game. That alone would actually let me beat the majority of people on Earth who, don't even know how to move the pieces. On top of that, I've actually done a bit of studying and practicing the game. My rating right now is 1136. It's dropped recently because I've lost a bunch of games in a row. If you take chess at all seriously, you'd probably say that puts me on the border of beginner and intermediate. But this is the cool part. That 1136 rating puts me higher than 84% of the people on chess.com. And that's just by knowing the rules, taking one online openings course, watching a whole bunch of YouTube videos, and just doing a bit of practice playing the game. I'm not a better person than 84% of the people on that site or the rest of the world that, doesn't even know the rules of the game. I just took a little bit of time to understand the game. Money is the exact same way. The vast majority of people don't really understand what money is. They don't know they could be playing the game of providing value instead of trading money for time. People get money because they learn what it is, learn how it works, and they put in some practice. I'm simplifying it a bit with that analogy, but not as much as you might think. So when people come at me with arguments like, you don't understand the structural inequalities inherent in the system, it hurts my head because yes, I do. I really do. I understand that, some people are born on third base and some people are born in the dugout. But if you want to play that analogy out, that's just the first inning. You have 9 innings to play. So the person born in the dugout who learns the rules and plays the game in the long run is going to do much better than the person born on third base who never bothers to even learn the rules. All right. That's what I got for you today, mixing chess and baseball analogies. Hopefully this recording worked. Again, I'm going to be bringing you what I think will be a very interesting discussion with Marcella Allison on Friday. That's on keeping your head above water when your life's turned upside down. So you won't want to miss that. All right. Until next week, stay free.